Theo? Good morning and welcome to Plymouth Church and Sunday Forum. We're very glad you're here, whether with us in person here or online, and we're, again, very glad you're here. My name is Jackie Prince. I'm one of the Sunday Forum committee members, and there are hearing devices on the table. If they would help you at all, please make use of them. And as usual, we owe a big debt of thanks to Theo Goletka above us, who keeps all the tech going strong. And one more item, when it's time for questions, we'll pass the microphone around, and please wait until it comes to you so that the people at home can hear as well as everyone here. The Campus Task Force is perhaps the most thorough, longest running study of Plymouth, its physical plant, its mission, and its place in the neighborhood and beyond that I can remember in my time here. Chartered by the deacons at the close of 2021, it produced an important summary in 2023, and now is in the midst of Campus Task Force 2.0, building on that work. To bring us up to date as to where we've been and where we're going, I'll turn the program over to Johanna.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Thanks for attending. There are actually three of us from the Campus Task Force 2.0 who are going to have the opportunity to share with you kind of where we've been, what we're doing, and where we intend to go. And then we are also going to do a little bit of a demonstration for you about kind of what happens during our monthly workshops. So more on that to come. I'll introduce myself, and then I'll turn it over to my co-hosts here. My name is Johanna Schussler. I'm in addition to serving on the Campus Task Force 2.0, I am also a deacon. Sometimes you might see me hanging out at that deacon's table during the 10 o'clock hour if you're not here. I will be doing the workshop-ish portion of this morning, and I'm going to turn it over to Sonia Cairns.
I'm a very long-time member. John and I each joined in the late 60s, so we've been around. So in addition to co-chairing this Campus Task Force with Johanna, I've done things in the church that have been relevant, like Racial Justice Task Force, and helped co-chair a strategic plan several years ago, and many other things that mean I know many of you in the group, so we're very happy to be here. Thanks, Brian.
Okay, my job is to give you about 2 years of history in 10 minutes or less, so that's not too hard. So we'll start with Campus Task Force 1.0, which at the time was known as the Campus Task Force. We didn't know what the point. You were moderator of the church for a while. Yeah. Actually, this whole process started in about 2018 when the deacons said, what's a strategic thing that we can work on? And we all said, our building is a big thing. It's like half of the. If you look at the church's balance sheet, it's about half of the assets of the church, and it makes this huge statement in the neighborhood, and are we using it to fulfill our purposes and our mission as a church as well as we could, and is it sending the kind of message to people that we want it to? So then we thought, this is a great thing to talk about, and then it's just sort of emerged, and then we went through things like a lot of history, and we came up with this idea of creating a campus task force, which the deacons created in 2021, but it's really started its work in 2022. And the purpose was to make recommendations for the future use of the current church building, to assess adjacent properties, both our own and others, and their potential to further Plymouth's mission, and also to help Plymouth become more welcoming and more connected to the community, which is also one of our purposes, to be a more welcoming church. So we had 17 members. We started looking at operational issues around about the building and the church. And what was really interesting is, and I know there are people here, if you were on the first task force, would you put your hand up, please? There are a few of us here. There were 17 members altogether. And it really evolved into a very spiritual process and very heart-based, a very soulful process of really looking at a vision of Plymouth that could emerge over time in terms of how we related to our community and how we grew spiritually and as a community ourselves. So the nature of the work really did evolve, and I would say safely that group underwent its own transformation, which is a word you'll hear a lot, and we'll get to that a little bit. So we saw our work as a catalyst to bring Plymouth closer to the bold standards we set for ourselves and the purposes of the church. And it's a little hard to read from where you are. Could have made the poster bigger, but the purposes are sort of out there. They're all over, but they're this aspirational statement that we are constantly trying to live into. We this task force decided to we should become audacious change makers in intentional, authentic, and mutually beneficial relationship with our neighbors. And neighbors is defined very loosely. It can be people in our immediate geographic vicinity. It can also be organizations and people that are outside of our immediate neighborhood, but with whom we have a connection and with whom we can have a mutually beneficial relationship. So Plymouth's long and deep commitment to justice became a focus of the work in the belief that working in the community to challenge inequities would be transformative. And transformation and revitalization of our church is necessary to thrive in the 21st century. That was also a kind of a core belief. So from about a year, from January 22 to 23, we spoke with members, received a lot of comments related to this work, met with neighbors, people in the neighborhood, in the community, and organizations. And there was one very important point to the work that emerged, and that the true transformative effect of the work relied on collaboration based on covenant, which is different than a lot of us have experienced work with people outside of Plymouth in the past. And it requires that we partner from a place of humility and respect, and that we move beyond egocentric, unintentional use of privilege and a comfortable relationship with power. So that was a very important thing, and it infuses our work even to this day. So we had a lot of ideas. We talked about a lot of things. And as you might imagine, just things from big to small, all kinds of things that we heard from people, but also that we imagined ourselves in terms of what would be beneficial in our work with our neighbors in our community. And we came up with 3 big ideas. And the commonality of those ideas was to seek a systemic change to challenges for those facing economic, social, and racial injustice. So there's a strong justice focus. We're bold and achievable, would take time and ongoing commitment from the congregation, and would require personal and congregational, community spiritual growth and practice as a precursor to and a companion to the work. So the first idea, and again, these were ideas we made with the specific purpose of outlining the things we were talking about, the concepts we were talking about. Otherwise, it would have been a purely theoretical discussion. We felt like we needed something concrete that we could say, this is something that Plymouth could do if it chose, if we committed ourselves to it, that would be have a large impact on the community and on us. Because part of the aspect of covenant is that we're a mutually beneficial relationship. So there's benefit to us, there's benefit to others. The first one was to create a community hub, which is a place where a safe, dignified space where all are welcome, where people could gather with perhaps programs and services desired by the community using our building, our space, and even services that we already have in existence, inviting organizations, outside organizations, who are experienced in these things to work with us and to work collaboratively with us and with other community members. And we could use existing space or perhaps new space that does not yet exist. Second one was create a community structure on the Groveland parking lot. So, you know, we've done a lot of work on the history of Plymouth and kind of how these things, how we came to be where we are and what we are in this physical space. This is the parking lot on the southeast corner. Where are we now? Yonder. That way, southeast corner of Groveland Avenue and Nicollet Avenue. It's 2/3 of an acre. It's that big chunk of parking lot that sits in front of that shopping center. And we thought, well, there's a place that is large enough and visible enough and central enough that it could really be something kind of important. And some of the things that we heard that would render something like that as a possibility were the need for growth and expansion of the Groveland food shelf, as an example. Meeting a demand for affordable housing, which seems insatiable. Expanding the community hub idea outside of Plymouth for other needed services and programs that people desired, and creating space for other things that the community requested or needed. And the third one was create a process for restorative justice. And this whole idea really came from the Racial Justice Initiative. And really it's acknowledging that Minnesota is home to one of the worst racial disparities of all 50 states, in due in part to historical oppression, settler colonialism, genocide, and exclusion. And our church resides on traditional territory of the Dakota people, and that land was acquired through coercion, financial pressure, and unkept promises. And for a long time back, we did a kind of a deep dive into that history as well. That we're members of a church community built on white privilege, and we live in a nation that was built by 250 years of slave labor. And that Plymouth can actively work to repair that harm. So that was number 3. So that led to that generally, and what I'll say is, this report, this Campus Task Force 1.0 report, is on the website, and you may have read it. Maybe it's been a while since you've read it. I always encourage people to go back and reread it, because what I just told you is a massively inadequate summary of the work that was done. And I think that I take a lot of pride in kind of the heart that went into this report, and it's really worth reading if you're interested in the future of Plymouth, which I'm sure you all are. So Campus Task Force 2.0 was created to continue the work of the first Campus Task Force to advance the various aspects of the 3 recommendations that were made. We were charged to act as a catalyst for deep congregational discernment as we continue the highly spiritual task of loving our neighbors. And our objective as a Christian congregational church was to move beyond our comfort and privilege to become a visible force of systemic change for those experiencing economic, environmental, social, and racial injustices. So all this work and the work of Campus Task Force 2.0 was to be in alignment with the purposes of the church. It's another great document to spend some time with, and driven by Plymouth's mission and its incorporate the recommendations of the 2020 growth plan, which I believe is also on the website, and which many of you may not have read or may not have read in some time, again, also, I think, a very helpful piece of work to digest. And so we began our work in February of 2024, and we'll complete our work this year. And we are working this year from 3 central questions. What is God calling Plymouth to be in this building, in this neighborhood, at this moment in time? How might we live more deeply into the purposes of the church? And how can we together and in new ways imagine and create a bold future and a shared actionable vision? So I'll turn it over to Sonia, and she'll talk about what we've heard.
Again. Now, I'm going to do a massively inadequate job of trying to summarize 6 months of conversation we've had with the congregation. And one of the things we've done is to keep track of people who come to programs, or when we go out to meet with the board, we know who those people are. So we think that about 110 people have participated in various conversations. There are several of you here who I think have not been part of those. And I wonder if you've never been in a meeting about Campus Task Force, would you just raise your hand? So some of you, but a lot have been around. So before we began this purpose work, which really was September through January and now into February. Let me put my timer on. We were invited to do a Sunday forum. So last August really is kind of a pilot. Thank you, Sunday forum people. There were a bunch of you here, and we began the conversation based on those 3 questions that Brian introduced. And one of the things that we were very clear about was stating at this session a couple of matters. One is, as our congregation seeks to embody the radical love and justice found in the teachings and spirit of Jesus, we will come together for conversations that are going to be loving, humble, and they need all of us to imagine new ways of working, new pathways, new relationships. In other words, how might we shape our future? A central question we asked at that session was, how might Plymouth seek to strengthen our relationship with neighbors? Again, talking a bit about who are our neighbors. There were a couple of young people at the meeting, and one of them said our neighbors are anybody we see, anybody with whom we have any contact. But here's what was really pretty compelling, I think, about that meeting, and it set the tone for the rest of the year. We were asking people in that meeting, I think there were 40 people, so what do you need to know during the next several months in terms of how we who did the 1.0 report were thinking? What do we need to do to go forward? And one of the things they said was, we need to know more stories about the neighborhood. For those of you who have been more connected, tell us. Another is, how do we get to know our neighbors when most of us don't live in the neighborhood? Another was, how do we present ourselves to the neighborhood? You know, Brian made the reference to what we're not going to do. We are not coming as the know-it-alls. We don't have all the answers. We don't even know what all the dreams and hopes and challenges are, though we're getting closer to that. And finally, people expressed a lot of interest in how this would go. So now I want to just go to the 3 different purposes and try and give you a snapshot of each. Remembering that the first purpose which is here, and if you are younger than I, you maybe can actually see it. But the within purpose says, we find sanctuary for our spiritual journey in the congregational tradition. We seek the sacred in ourselves and all others, cultivate our deepest and best selves, nurture our capacity to love, and live in the hope of renewal and transformation. Again, the word that Brian gave to us. And so we were really asking people at these first sessions, September, October, what kind of experiences have you had at Plymouth that help you live in the spirit of renewal and transformation? And it was meant to be deeply spiritual, and these programs indeed were. And one of the things that we heard people say again and again is being in small group discussions in any form, whether it's the minister's Bible courses, whether it's being in the choir, whether it's being in a board, whether it's being in one of our kind of programs, is what really makes people feel their faith and the broad assortment of faith journeys that we're all on. Then, we tried to dig a little bit more deeply and said, so how might Plymouth do more to really strengthen that spiritual, personal, one-to-one kind of relationship you have? And they were very specific answers, but they're what you might imagine. It's more of the same. Give us more opportunities together. Respond to our ideas to be together where we share deeply with one another and refer to our faiths and talk about what is the spiritual nature of why we are here at Plymouth. Then the second couple of months were November, December, and we talked about the second purpose, which is we walk together in a covenanted Christian community. And so we were asking people, what is a covenanted community for you? And one of the things that I most remember was an individual who said, it's sitting somewhere with one other human being who looks me in the eyes and listens to what I say and hears what I say and tells me back what I said, and then I hear that person. That to me is something that we need more of and reminds me that we are indeed in a covenanted community. There were many, many other ideas, but the ones that really came through were about deepening the personal relationships. Another thing that happened during those two meetings were a sense that the lay community is very important at Plymouth. And by November, of course, we knew about many changes in Plymouth that we hadn't known before. Not much before anyway. So we knew that we were going to have ministerial changes. And those issues came up, even though we were asking different questions. People were saying, there's a lot going on in our church community right now. We're a little unsettled about it, but we have great faith in one another. And because we're a covenanted community and because we are learning in many different ways to talk to one another with candor, and here, we're ready. We can handle this. And I think that was about the time that we all sent notes to the deacons saying, we have your backs, we're ready to go. So then the final set of meetings were in January, and now we have another one a week from today in the Howard Kahn Gallery, and we're back to neighboring. And we're trying to get people to think about why does our purpose lead us to deal with our neighbors? And Johanna, you're sitting there. Can you actually read Purpose 3 out loud?
Yes, but I think
Okay, great.
So the Plymouth's Beyond purpose reads, God's creation benefits from our love lived out in the world. We invest our time, talent, and treasure consistent with our values, serve people in need, advance human rights, further social, economic, racial, and environmental justice, and share our vision of progressive Christianity while respecting all faith traditions.
Thanks. So last month, we were asking people, why does that purpose inspire you, or does that purpose inspire you to become more dependable neighbors? And the response was heavily, my faith, my Christian faith practiced at Plymouth does indeed. There have been other forces as well. For example, I grew up in a Catholic community, or I grew up in a Lutheran community where the work we did with neighbors was important. Or somebody talked about being a child and seeing her World War II mother feed strangers who came through the neighborhood. People who come to Plymouth were pretty clear that they're here because, in part, because they discovered or they knew about the way we neighbor. And some people would say, I came for the music, I discovered the neighborhood too. Or I came because of the neighborhood issues. Or I didn't want to be like my former faith community that talked a lot about it but did nothing. So here we are, we're on the brink of having a meeting in a week in which we're going to explore how do we really step in now? This neighborhood is in crisis. You know, two groceries, no grocery store. Ace Hardware is left. CVS is closed and or leaving. Another restaurant is closing. We're worried about our parking lot, which will have no cars in it because there are not enough people doing anything here. So we want to explore together, how do we become dependable neighbors? And the last thing I really want to say is that people who came in January said, we have to be different kind of neighbors than we've been in the past. We have to listen more. We have to get to know them through repeated contacts. We have to figure out how to get to know them. So that really is where we're headed. We will then in March for some short number of months, go through a discernment process about what really do we want to recommend back to the deacons, but we're on a path. I think we're going to, I wanted to ask, and I don't know if we have any time here, of what have you heard? Johanna, you're a timekeeper. Should we ask a question about what they've heard of that? Do we have a couple of minutes? Or should we leave that to the very end? Okay, so be thinking about what you've heard from Brian and me that resonates with you, and at the very end of the meeting, we'll go back to that. Okay, Johanna is going to do something now that's really fun.
All right, thanks. Thank you, Sonia. Thanks you, Brian. So they have set the context for Campus Task Force 1.0, what that task force did, where they arrived, some recommendations that they made, the transformation that those folks participating in that process went through. Campus Task Force 2.0 was sort of charged with helping to support the congregation experience a similar to the degree possible transformation, moving through the purposes of the church from within to among into beyond. And something that I'm going to introduce, something that's been really fundamental to the Campus Task Force 2.0 process, Sonia referenced. People have told us that they have some of their most meaningful spiritual experiences when they were in conversation with one another. So the work of Campus Task Force 2.0 has really been creating opportunities for folks to talk to each other, and more importantly, to listen to one another. Because of what Brian shared earlier, that our work is really about building intentional, authentic, mutually beneficial relationships. And when we can do that together, among, we're in a better place to do that beyond. So what I'm going to invite folks to do, we're going to do a little demonstration of how our workshops work, which means I'm going to invite you into conversation with another person. Folks viewing at home, this is available to you as well. If you're watching with someone else, I invite you to have the conversation with them. If you're watching by yourself, I invite you to maybe find a piece of paper and do some journaling on this question that I'm going to be inviting folks to think on. This will need to be perhaps uncomfortably brief. We don't have as much time as we do in our workshops to engage in these conversations. But so we also have a little bit of space limitation. So I will invite you to, if you need to, move chairs around so that you can listen to your conversation partner. But what I'll invite you to do is find someone to talk to. There's an invitation here. If you'd like to use this as an opportunity to talk to someone new, you can take that. If you would prefer to use this as an opportunity to talk to someone that you arrived with today or know very well, that's okay. There's no rules about who you pair up with. But if you want to lean into comfort or lean into learning somebody new, it's up to you. One moment. I should have advanced the slide. We are moving into the discussion questions portion of the presentation. So what we are going to do is in your pairs, maybe let's take a moment to do that. Please establish who you are going to be talking to for the next 5 minutes or so. And I invite you to move your chair, move around if you need to do that. Please raise your hand if right this minute you do not have a conversation partner, because we have help for you if you do not have a conversation partner. Is there anyone who is currently unpaired? No, you're good. Okay, so I see people in pairs. I do not see anybody raising hands, which I think means that everybody has someone to talk to, correct? Okay. Excellent. So then what we're going to do next, in our workshops, we generally take a more structured approach to this, and I give a lot of instructions, and it takes a lot of time. So this is going to be a somewhat less structured approach, which some of you may enjoy, and some of you may find uncomfortable. This is a theme, right? But I've got a conversation question that I'm going to invite you to explore with your partner. We're going to take 5 minutes. And I'd like for you to each speak to this question, which means you each have approximately 2.5 minutes. I can tell you when 2.5 minutes is up, but I cannot make you switch. So I just am going to invite you to please be mindful that we are both speaking and listening to each other. And the conversation question, this is very unfair because it's 2 questions. And 2.5 minutes, but it's this. Ponder this. What kind of relationship do you have now with people, places, businesses, or organizations in this neighborhood? Now, Brian kind of talked about neighborhood earlier. Sonia referenced that like people have different notions of what neighborhood means. For the purposes of this conversation, it's up to you what you think this neighborhood means. Does it mean what we can see from this block? Does it mean Stevens Square community? Does it mean broader Minneapolis? I'm gonna leave that up to you for the time being. But ponder, what kind of relationship do you have right now with this neighborhood? And what would help you to feel more like a neighbor? So those are I understand that there are introverted and extroverted thinkers. Acknowledging this may be somewhat uncomfortable, I am going to turn you loose for 5 minutes to explore this topic with your conversation partner. I'll let you know when 2.5 minutes have passed. Enjoy. Okay, that was 2.5 minutes. So if you have been speaking, I invite you to listen. And if you've been listening, I invite you to speak. Okay, that was 5 minutes. I'm going to ask you to bring your conversation to a close. This is always the hardest part. But now you know each other, and so you can keep talking in some future date. If you haven't yet, please thank your conversation partner. Express gratitude in some way. Make note of their name if you are having a very intentional conversation that you would like to continue having at some later time. And I'm going to invite you to bring your attention back up to the front of the room, not because I have anything useful to say, but because I'm going to invite folks to share out. We've got just a few minutes, and I think it might be interesting. So all of you just had a conversation with one person, and I think it would be fun to invite anyone to share. We can probably take like 3 or 4 comments, but what did you hear? What's something new that you learned in the course of your conversation in answer to these questions? Sonia will be passing the mic, so if you have something you'd like to share, please raise your hand, and Sonia will pass the mic.
That person is over.
I learned that as an introvert, I like to do things by myself, but I learned that that is not always the case, and that chances to get to meet neighbors and to do things sometimes works really well in a family unit or a few people together. Not everybody needs to do everything by themselves. That was really enlightening.
Yes.
So when we were talking, Jean said that she's been in a couple of churches that have actually had homeless people hanging out in the church. And we have no lack of homeless people around here. It's kind of a radical suggestion. But you know, the person beside you becomes your neighbor if you just simply have them around you often. And the great majority of homeless people, there's nothing to fear. And whether you want to talk with them or not, that's fine. Just like other people, you find ones that you may end up talking with, and others you say no thanks.
Okay.
Our conversation with the first question was really very short, and it was that we haven't really integrated into the neighborhood or have a relationship with the neighborhood much at all. And even though I officed in Loring Park for, 20, 30 years, I was really just a consumer there. And most of our experiences here would be going to a restaurant, going to a coffee shop, but really not developing a relationship at all. And we thought, that wouldn't happen unless we had opportunities to be in a small group, to actually sit and talk to someone, and hopefully it wouldn't be in this imposing, intimidating church.
In the neighborhood.
Yes.
Okay. Anybody else? So this is a program to give me exercise.
My sense is that the two of us, and correct me if I'm wrong, have many different kinds of connections, but they're all pretty superficial as far as actually knowing people in the neighborhood.
Okay, another one?
Well, I was interested in Andy's report of his son Theo's construction of the free pantry, which his son Theo constructed as one of his Eagle Scout projects. And so that got not only Theo connected with a lot of people in the neighborhood, but Andy and the family as well. And so that was a really cool way to get to know people because of what that free pantry has achieved.
Thanks.
Okay, I trust, even without hearing from each one of you, that you all had something that you learned, something meaningful, something that stood out to you. And I apologize that we're not able to hear from more of you. I will say this before I turn it back over to Sonia. The Campus Task Force 2.0 has like a site on Plymouth's website. If you go to Plymouth's website and search CTF 2.0 or Campus Task Force, you'll see our webpage. And there's a contact us form on it that doesn't get very much use. If you have something that you learned today that you would like to share with us, or if you are watching from home and you're like, I didn't get to share out, please go to our webpage. We want to hear from you. We know that this information, the information that you all have, is what we need to move forward in this work. So please do use it. Also, all of the notes from all of the previous conversations that we've had since September have been summarized and are on that page. So if you're curious about wanting to dig in deeper to what we've been hearing, our webpage has more information. Sonia, back to you.
Thanks.
Oops. Oh no. Sorry, pay no attention to the slide.
Look at that.
I'm glad Johanna mentioned the notion of end-of-month notes. One of the things that the Campus Task Force promised one another and people came to meetings is, we're hearing you. And this is not the kind of meeting in which you go and express something very meaningful, and it could be very strategic to what we're doing, and it's never heard again. So we have just a couple of minutes, and Johanna, I don't know exactly what time it is right now. 10:50. Okay, it's 10:50. We would love to hear from you. What are you hearing about Campus Task Force, either in its origin or what we're doing now? What are you hearing, and do you have any ideas for us about how we enhance these conversations we're having with the Plymouth community so that together we really can shape our future? Anything that you want recorded so that we will remember, what are you thinking? Yes. Oh, and we have a mic.
Okay. Here's the mic. Oh, good. Thank you. Hi, I'm Shirley Rutherford, and I just joined the Campus Task Force about 2 months ago because I think it's the most exciting thing that we have going on. And the point I want to make is that this is for everybody. You know, there's a group of 17 or 20 or whatever it is that, you know, that sort of leads the details of it. But we really want everybody to step into this and find a way to make it yours if you want to. I think this is the kind of church we want to be. So that's it.
Go ahead. Someone right in here raised their hand. Can you again?
I'll say something.
If nobody else wants to say something, I'm Linda Simey. What I heard today was something that I didn't understand how to put into words, and it's whether it's a greet you in the front of the church when you come in, and you're being friendly. I'm not saying you're not being friendly, but it's what the depth of your relationship is. And is it superficial? That was the word somebody used. I think we're looking for something that makes us part of the neighborhood that's not superficial.
I'm thinking of Beth's sermon this morning, which was really what I needed to hear. But a piece of it that stuck with me is that there has to be systemic change. We have to change how we do things from being white male as what's perfect, and figure out something altogether different. And it's almost like starting with a blank piece of paper and then going from there to figure out who we need to be in order to be the church that we want to be, that God's calling us to be.
Thanks.
Bill Reed, what I'm hearing just in general from people in the church as well as outside the church, and then an awful lot from my own head, is that there's an awful lot of overwhelm right now, both, well, nationally, internationally, within the Twin Cities, and of course, within our church. But partly based on, again, I think Beth's sermon this morning was just so very, very important. But the campus task force needs to push on. I think the work that you're doing is very, very, very important. It's inspiring, and hopefully the overwhelm won't be allowed to take the center stage.
I'm going to claim the last comment, if I could, and bring us to a close.
And may I say one thing before that?
Absolutely.
Okay, I'll make this quick. So there really is trouble brewing in the neighborhood. And 3 of us went to meet with the head of Stevens Square Community Organization. Brian and Karen had already done that. But we said, how do we get to know neighbors? And she gave a very concrete idea, and you're going to hear more about it, about specific times. She said twice a week, every week, we go on walks in the neighborhood. And we're all together. We go into stores, we go into restaurants, we stop people on the street. And you do that one time, you get to know somebody, you do it twice, you do it 3 times, suddenly you know people. And she is saying enough of the talk about wanting to come out of the big fortress and meet neighbors. Just do it, and we'll welcome you. So stay tuned.
Thank you. Along with that, I think one of the best things that has come out of, I don't know whether it's the task force or another group, but the presence team is a wonderful way to have an excuse to collaborate with neighbors. And concretely, I think tonight, I think, is the Empty Bowl, excuse me, the Empty Bowl event at Butter Bakery and Cafe in the Nicollet Square building. And so if you want to have a nice soup supper, that's a wonderful way to go. I think we need to give a big thanks to the committee. And thank you all for coming, and we hope you'll come back next week when a representative from Minneapolis Community College is going to be here and telling us about their program for students that have had interactions with the justice system. And I think I know it's a wonderful program, and I think it's going to be a presentation you won't want to miss. So please come, and thank you all for being here.